You hear us talk all the time about major gifts. So I think it is appropriate to have a session today talking about converting mid level donors to major gifts. Oftentimes, we find that there's a void between donor acquisition and major donor strategy, right? We know we need to bring in new donors and we know we need to focus on major gifts. But sometimes the pieces of how to connect that and how to grow our major gifts program can be forgotten if we're not intentional. So let's move into that first slide there, please, Trish. I want to start by reflecting back to some of the earlier days in my career when I was a client of Pride instead of on the Pride team. My fabulous consultant, Patty, had me going as annual gifts director. I was really trying to bring in new donors, and I was building an annual gifts club in a hospital and got very, very excited about this new donor acquisition. And I brought all these new donors in the first year. Um, and then we put in place some stewardship strategies, and a lot of them continued giving in the second year. And I was super excited. And at some point in time, I remember looking at Patty and saying, I feel like there's so much more capacity with some of these people who are giving consistently at this like $1,000 plus level. But we had at that point not something really in place yet to move them up. So it became a really fun next step to convert some of those mid-level donors. And I would say when we're talking mid-level donors, if we sort of think about our annual giving clubs, that top level of our annual gifts club, and then that sort of entry level of special gifts, and how can we move them into major gifts, or what we would say it would be a signature gift, a gift of maybe 50,000 plus, right? And so we had put some intentional strategy in place, and lo and behold, when you ask, you get some of them, right? And so I think my lesson learned in that was, we were doing really great, rocking and rolling and getting some retention built. But at some point, you have to make that suggestion to help deepen their engagement and increase their giving. And Michaela and Jenna are going to talk all about that, but I wanted to lay the groundwork and kind of remind us all that that intentionality in the process will be super helpful to go ahead and deepen not only the retention but the level of giving with our donors. So let's move into this next slide. This is a great study that was done by AFP and the Center for Nonprofits and Philanthropy at the Urban Institute. They worked together for what they called a fundraising effectiveness project, and this was from Q3 in 2024. uh, where you can see donor retention, and it's very, very interesting to look at the higher level, the higher percentage of donor retention correlates with the higher level of gift. Well, that makes sense, right? I'm more invested and I'm more likely to be a repeat donor, so you're more likely to retain me. So I think this is an important reminder that not only is stewardship important for retention, but it is important for getting those higher level gifts. So, where you're needing to focus on sort of that scalability with stewardship, moving down from your top level donors, moving down to some of your mid-sized donor, where you see the opportunities that exist. In a perfect world, we're properly stewarding all of our donors and we're building relationships. But the reality of the day today is we don't always have time to fire on all cylinders in all of those areas. But if we can remember that stewardship starts at that first gift, and that not only is it our responsibility to steward them, but also to suggest perhaps a higher level gift as we move forward, that we can then make the magic happen and really exponentially grow our revenues. So let's move on to that next slide. That golden donation, securing that second donation, is really going to help with retention, right? So making sure that the minute someone makes a gift, that we are properly stewarding them, right? We know that donors want to know the impact of their gifts, and yet sometimes we forget to be timely with our communication. We overlook things. We're not communicating as well as we can. So making sure that we're experimenting with innovative solutions to make people feel like insiders is a key to success, right? Because we know if we can get them repeated supporters through our stewardship efforts, that we are going to unlock the keys to the kingdom, right? We know that it is infinitely easier and less expensive to keep an existing donor than it is to acquire a new one. So think about that. Donors who have made 3 to 6 gifts typically average an even stronger retention rate of 61.2% year to date. So keep on our stewardship efforts. With that, I want to hand it over to Michaela to talk a little bit more about that mid level donor and why we should focus there.
Thank you so much, Marty. And I always love hearing about your experience as a client as well as a support system here at Pride. So thanks for kicking it off with that. We've talked a little bit already today about why it's important to focus on mid-level. Jared touched on it in his discussion at the very beginning, and Marty shared about the pipeline. I mean, mid-level donors are, in many cases, your best pipeline for major gifts. So we should be focusing on them for the future of your giving, for the future of your fundraising operations. But I like to also put into context why it's so important to focus on it right now. Mid-level donors represent 35%, maybe even more for your organization of annual giving revenue. You can't ignore that when you're trying to renew your gifts, when you're trying to increase your level of giving to meet your expected goals for this year. This is a really important segment to cultivate and to steward. Also, the great news is that mid-level donors only are about 5% of the annual giving population, which means this is a really manageable segment for you, right? Like if you're really thoughtful about how you're interacting with them and strategic about the time you spend, you can be quite efficient in this space. So next slide, please. We know that we need to focus on mid-level management, but where do we find them? In operating in mid-level management, start with a pool and think of your organic pipelines as your organization. What does that look like? Are you an educational institution? Are alumni a part of your conversation? Patients, perhaps? The families of patients, the families of students, social media followers, newsletter subscribers to any of your programs. This is where you start. Then establish some parameters to support you in the qualification work. When you are working to qualify a donor in this space, your objective is to learn, are they giving at their maximum threshold now? In which case, thank them and steward them. Or are they just testing the waters to see if maybe there's a way to be more engaged, more involved. Maybe they need to know a little bit more. When you're working in this qualification effort, think through what makes sense for your organization. Maybe the parameters you establish for this qualification work is a pool of donors that have given a first-time contribution of $250 to $1,000. I encourage you to think also of cumulative giving because sometimes organizations that we work with miss out on a couple great prospects. I call them eclectic donors. They might give $50 here, $150 there, $75 at this email campaign. And when the gifts come in, they don't necessarily stand out at the top of your report. But if you do the math, and over that year, somebody has given $800 of new support to your organization, you definitely want to talk to that person, right? And see how better can we engage you going into the future. So this is where you start in your qualification efforts. Next slide, please. Let's talk through what you look for in your database, in your CRM. So that recency of giving, was it within the last 3 years? They're fresh, they're recently thinking about you all. The frequency of giving, getting to that point of cumulative giving throughout a year. The gift size. Have they been increasing their gift size to you over a period of time? What an easy phone call to make and say, hey, we've noticed that you're increasing your investment in us. Thank you. I'd love to learn more about why you've made that decision. The purpose of their gifts. And this is just information to inform you what questions to ask, not necessarily to not have a conversation with somebody. Here's an example of what I mean by that. If their gift is unrestricted, that could be information for you to learn about. Are you really savvy and understand how valuable an unrestricted gift is to a nonprofit? Or does that mean that you don't yet know about all the details and intricacies of our programs and haven't yet found that magical fit? On the other side, maybe they're designating very specifically to a program. I urge you to not make the assumption that that's the most important thing to them. Perhaps it is, but maybe that's also an opportunity for you to share with them other things that you're accomplishing at your organization. Soft credits. Employee matches. Look for this. If somebody has taken the effort to fill out whatever form it is at their place of employment to make sure their gift is doubled, tripled, whatever the agreement is, that means that they want to see a significant impact. Have a conversation with that prospect. I would make the argument that any donor advised fund donor that comes through should have a qualification meeting. Why? They've taken the time to establish a fund. They're being thoughtful. They are a savvy donor, or maybe they have an advisor that's helping them become a savvy donor. Learn what they'd like to accomplish at your organization. Also, take a look at their volunteer history. How many of your events are they coming to? Are they bringing friends to the events? And think through other affiliations. This can help you tenfold in developing a relationship if you understand the map of how they're connected to your organization. Again, are they a parent? Are they a patient, subscriber, member? Next slide, please. Now, you've already got what you need to be successful in qualification efforts, moving mid-level donors up into your major donors. But this is the icing on the cake sort of data that you can take a look at. If you've got it available, consider it. This is great to use. Open rates on emails. What subjects are they interested? What are they taking a look at? Click links on your e-newsletter or blog. What subjects are they investigating? Take a look at visits on your website. This can help you when you're presenting material or putting together communications. If a donor or a prospect is forwarding an email to their friends, that means that they are very interested in what it is that you've got to say. Are they connecting with you on social media? That's another way to indicate that they're interested in learning more. And then this last piece, inbound interactions, this ideally is tracked in your database, right? Are they giving you phone calls? Are they stopping by? Have they responded back to your emails? That's great. I even like tracking, when you get that little pledge form back in the mail and somebody's taken the time to write you a love little note about how much they like this or that. That's an elevated level of engagement that they're initiating. That's a great tool to use to move into that qualification meeting. So we've talked a little bit about how to identify our pools when we're working through the qualification process in mid-level donors. Next, Jenna is going to take some time to talk through how we measure, or rather, um, I'm trying to think of the word, it just left my brain. Sorry, you all. How we manage our time and effort between mid-level giving and major giving.
Thanks, Michaela and Marty. I want to start by just asking how many of you have an identified pool of mid-level donors? You can throw it in the chat or you're welcome to unmute and give us a shout. Would love to hear from some of you. Is this something that is built into the structure of your organization? Do you have a pool of these identified mid-level prospects right now? Anybody? Perfect. Tamara, thank you. Let's get you a poll.
Siegfried does. She's on it. Lisa just did it recently. Fantastic. I'm glad to see that you guys are exploring this space or aware enough to be here today to know that this is a great opportunity for you and your organization. Like Marty, I have worked at organizations where we had a really intentional effort for acquisition and annual fund and bringing new donors and new prospects to our radar. We had our major gift officers, right? So we were working those known entities or trying to build really deep relationships with those high capacity individuals. What we didn't have was anything in the middle. And so we also knew that we were moving toward bigger and bigger gaps in our donor pipeline. And that's when we as a team really set up this mid-level process for the organization that I was serving at the time. So when you think about, okay, great, Jenna, we found this new pocket of donors. We've got this sort of profile built around mid-level prospects. We've identified and defined what these gift levels mean for our organization and what triggers we might look at, as Michaela shared with you guys. What do we do with them now? Like, how do we manage them? How do we work that into our day and even into our shop, right? Um, when we think about mid-level donors, we have to consider and treat them differently than our average annual gift donor, right? They're not a $50 prospect. They are at a higher level, but I can't quite give them the same amount of time and cultivation that I would carve out for a $50,000 prospect, right? We've got to find some economies of scale that work for our organizations, as well as that long-term cultivation that we need to really move these donors forward. Setting up a giving society or a gift club does not equate to a strategic program. Saying you're a member of the blah, blah, blah club is not really a consistent program, right? Building the structure around it, scheduling time and intention behind it, building out a stewardship plan specific to that frame of giving. Thinking about our mid-level prospects, not only as our current pipeline, but thinking about them as future major gift donors, we really want to have intentional conversations. As Michaela said, we want to cultivate them for qualification. So we want to start by asking their why. What are their passions? Why are they connected to our organization? And how do they want to be communicated with and supported as they deepen that relationship? Think of these as donor interviews, right? Identify those growth opportunities and preferences and really develop some understanding and frame of reference for their motivations in giving. Again, considering the profile and the demographics of these mid-level donors within your database is really important. They're not all going to be young professionals, though many of them will be. There might be elderly folks that are at a place where they've sort of balanced their retirement income and they know that they can afford to give a little more generously now. Maybe they just set up their first qualified charitable distribution and they realize that they have an income problem, which is an exciting place to be in life, right? So these donors may come to us at all different stages in life and their philanthropic journeys. When we think about establishing a strategy for this work, we have to be really thoughtful as fund managers. We have to think about the staff that are going to handle this program, right? If we don't assign this work to anyone, it's not going to get done. If we don't set some goals around this work, we're never going to reach our full potential, right? You have to think about a very donor centric staff person on your team, someone that really loves to have conversations, someone that's really good at qualification, I think is important in this mid level role. Because ultimately, what you're looking for is someone who can read the clues, right? Look at your annual gifts, look for those triggers that indicate this is a prospect who could do more or who is really just waiting for that conversation and that appropriate cultivation. Let's go on to the next slide. Giving USA uses the terms pioneers and settlers, which absolutely sent me back to playing Oregon Trail in the fourth grade. So I'm going to age myself there. I think these are interesting terms to use. I would never share these with a donor, but internally we have all sorts of silly phrases, right? Giving USA uses the term pioneers to define those donors that show significant capacity. They are donors that are really engaged, and there are indicators that lead us to believe there's some growth and that we could move these prospects from mid-level to really transformational gifts. This is a group where we want to be very intentional about targeting that segment and giving them true major gift cultivation, because they are most likely to move into those higher signature gift levels. The settlers, these are incredible donors that are consistent, right? These are the folks that are going to be loyal. If we treat them properly, they will likely be long-time recurring donors, but they are maybe more comfortable at that mid-level giving. As one of the team members touched on earlier, they are probably giving at their max capacity right now, but that doesn't mean that they aren't really good prospects for planned giving or for longer term cultivation. These are the folks that we want to be aware of their preferred communication. We want to know and understand their timing of giving. And we want to really think carefully about their stewardship preferences. Again, we want to balance the amount of time that we're spending on these important donors, always looking to move our donors to their best gift for the organization. On to the next slide. When we've identified our who, we've figured out who on our team is going to help lead this work. Again, it's really about defining the criteria for our organization that makes the most sense. Everybody's dollar ranges and what you call a major gift versus what Marty's hospital might call a major gift. There's always a little bit of shift in that, right? Define the criteria that fits your organization and your database. So for me, a mid-level gift, someone that was giving above $1,000 with any regularity, they were definitely folks that I was going to look at, and I was going to assign to a mid-level gift officer for additional cultivation. We would set up a stewardship plan, establish those KPIs, right? Define what it is going to look like, not only to trigger this person into a mid-level portfolio, but what are we going to do to track them? If we don't plan ahead at the beginning, it's going to be really hard to go back and assess that data and see what is the return on this investment of time. Set your KPIs around engagement, set your KPIs around giving, and focus really primarily on those two things, especially at that early stage when you're first establishing a mid-level effort. You've got to give yourself some time, right? You want to even set maybe 18 months to really lean into this work, and then to sit back and sort of assess it and see those results. We want to have reasonable expectations. Again, this pool of donors is about growth in their giving journey, right? They're not going to go usually from $1,000 gift to a $15,000 gift overnight. This is going to take some time, and it's going to take some of those really honest, transparent conversations and cultivation touches with our donors. When you are thinking about your metrics, how we're going to track and see if this work is worthwhile for our team, for our donor base, think about metrics like the number of donors communicated with. Think about the number of donors that we've had contact with outside of a face-to-face or a phone call visit. So were we emailing directly? Getting beyond those mass communications, right? Making these really personal touches. Looking at the number of donors who renewed, and then did they increase their gift? What percentage increase did we see once we started them in this intentional cultivation strategy? Looking at the number of donors who did transition from a mid-level up into that major gift level. That's the key indicator that we're really going to look at. And we're going to start to see how these dollars line up and stack up quickly. I want to give you all some time for questions today. As we move into kind of Q&A time, I also just want to say that even if these mid-level donors don't ultimately move into pioneer territory, right? If they don't make it to your naming wall, you have still made an incredible connection with these donors. You have likely built a deeper happiness with their engagement with your organization. You probably, at a mid level, are giving them more attention than any of their other charities that often overlook that everything in between, right? Think about how those dividends may not be measurable. We may not be able to quickly quantify those in a 12-month period, but they will be felt. These are the folks that are going to send you a surprise $600,000 planned gift later down the line, right? Those are kind of the dreams. I want to open it up for questions. I want to talk with you all about strategies or times you've seen wins in this mid-level assessment. And I'm also happy to share more about how I shaped a position around mid-level giving at a former higher ed position as well. Oh, Lisa has trouble getting folks to meet in person, specifically at the mid-level. I'm assuming, Lisa, they appreciate a thank you call, but don't want a tour, etc. Yeah, because they think my gift is not worth your time, right? I've heard that direct statement from a donor. Oh, no, no, you don't need to spend time on me. I don't give enough. Is that some of what you think you're hearing, Lisa? Feel free to unmute. Oh, oh, got it. You haven't done a lot under 5K. That's okay. Again, for your organization, 5 to 10 might be the mid-level within your donor base. You guys have certainly got a significant pool at that higher major gift level. I think, again, it's about meeting them where they are, cultivating for qualification, right? Do they not want to meet because they're living in the trenches, right? They're high performing professionals. They've got kids. They're running a busy schedule. Can you have a really meaningful phone call with them, scheduled or unscheduled? I often find surprisingly deep conversations can happen when I just catch you at the right time. I know that takes a little effort. It takes repeat tries. Scheduling a Zoom, right? So that it fits into their workday. It doesn't have to be a face-to-face meeting. And I always think about how we can make it easy for our donors. So, hey, I'm in the area. Can I pop by your office tomorrow at 2 p.m.? As opposed to, will you come to our site? Can we carve out an hour for you to take a tour and I want to treat you to lunch? And that does feel maybe overwhelming for someone who does not see themselves as a major gift prospect yet. All right, Elton, in determining which current donors are mid-level, yes. So I would look at your annual giving. I would total it for the year. So to Michaela's point, these may be donors that are giving recurring monthly gifts. Again, that $25 a month doesn't seem like a lot on the monthly gift report, but when we start to look at that history and consistent giving, it does add up quickly. I also think that you want to look at all the types of gifts. So if they're giving through personal, through business, through a DAF, if they're dropping gifts from different places, I think that's another great indicator that there's capacity and engagement there. Again, we've got to get to know them and understand why they give, where they give, and when they give, right? I like your idea of looking at kind of an average over multiple years as well, Elton. Again, this is sort of a flexible process depending on your database, the size of your organization, and the scalability of your staffing as well. One of the key things that I don't know if it was actually on the slide or not, when you're thinking about this work and you're carving out some metrics and time to dedicate to it, If you cannot assign a full-time gift officer to really look at that mid-level, you've got to set some time allocation to the person that's wearing this hat secondarily, right? So I'm a major gift officer or an annual gift officer. That's my primary role, but I'm also working on this mid-level effort. Am I working on it 50% of the time? As a manager, have we carved out that time and responsibility and really given them the flexibility to have space for this work? I think that that's really important. Michaela, yes. Yes, thank you for sharing with Lisa. It is definitely an effort. It's definitely going to take more than one attempt as well. Substantial phone calls are so important. Let's see, Tamra, we have an office staff of 2 handling all volunteers, homeowner partners, financials, board management. Yes, I see you and your staff. I really appreciate the perspective. Tamra, one of my favorite things is to look at operational structures and org charts and how different teams sort of break out the scope of responsibility and work that needs to get done. Getting your board invested in assisting with donor management is definitely something that Pride can help you navigate. It is a key part of what we encourage all of our clients to do, right? The problem is we don't always recruit our board members for the job that we need them to fill. And so if your board was not recruited as a fundraising board, it's going to take some more time and training and even cultivation toward that task, right? So I think that's the first thing. You've got to start with your board members that are comfortable in that role. As Michaela and Jake pointed out earlier in the chat, sometimes it's setting them up to have some reps where they don't have to ask for a gift. So could you start by assigning a list of stewardship calls to your board members, right? Targeted at that mid-level gift range, and provide a little bit of training and context to those board members so they understand this is a prospect that we believe we can cultivate further. Can you spend 5 minutes and have a quality conversation thanking them for their gift and asking what motivated them to support our cause? Giving your board members some tips and tools to make a really meaningful stewardship touch is also going to help offset the lack of staffing that you have as well. Again, this does not have to be, and in most cases is not going to be a full-time mid-level gift officer role. A lot of our shops just aren't staffed that way. Can you carve out 20% of your time, right? Can you block 1 hour a week where you're going to look at your data, find those breadcrumbs that lead me to the right pool, and then set some intentionality about how we're cultivating and communicating with them. All right, yes, emphasize stewardship. Awesome. Tamara, you inherited them. Yeah, that happens. I still think that you can find incredible ways to use your board members and lean into their strength. It's still early in the year. If you haven't done it yet, have you had a one-on-one with every single one of your board members? Not just about their annual commitment to your organization, but about their interests, where they want to serve on your board, what they want to gain from being a board member. I think that those are really great ways to say, oh, I hear you say this is a goal of yours, or this is an area of interest for you. Here's a demographic that we really want to focus on this year, or here's a segment of our data pool that we'd really like to increase our efforts on. And maybe you can start to align some of your board work through those conversations. Thank you all so much for the conversation and the chat engagement today. We always love that.